William says, is the kilojoule to kilocalorie conversion ratio, which usually when people are looking at that, actually, Chad, I'll let you work that through.
Yeah,
I'll just read the question. You're the smart guy here. So is the kilojoule to kilocalorie conversion ratio consistent over the different energy systems? In other words, are our bodies as efficient at low intensity work as they are at high intensity work? Thanks, from William.
Yep. It's crazy how these short questions yield such long responses, but this is one of them. First off, let me do just a touch of housekeeping. So on the last podcast a couple of weeks ago, I made the comment that 99% of athletes can still lift their FTP without lifting their VO2 max. And I totally stand by that. 99% is probably an exaggeration, but the point is most. What I want to make clear is that I was not implying that VO2 max, or rather your power at VO2 max or your aerobic capacity, however you want to view it, isn't a concern, or that it isn't trainable, because it absolutely is. And every ramp test kind of bears that out. You probably see at least a little bit of a bump in your VO2 max, a little bit of a bump in your FTP. Ideally, those things are happening concurrently. What I was trying to convey is that our cycling economy and or efficiency, which is what we're going to talk about today, hasn't yet been maximized. So by all means, raise both. I want your FTP to go up. I want your power at VO2 max or your VO2 max itself to go up, all these things. But for all these riders who think that they have a frozen FTP or that they've plateaued, today I'm going to make it abundantly clear, I hope, is that changes in efficiency are still on the table for just about everybody. And I do think that's 99, probably 0.9% of athletes. Okay, so William, to your question. First off, I despise you and I love you. First, you're going to make me talk about maybe my least favorite topic in all of exercise science. And we've covered this before and it's baffling every time. I think I made a little more sense of it this time. I liken this to discussions on keto. I mean, they're both just things I just don't want any part of, but I'm going to bear down and try to offer something useful today. So to your first question, a kilocalorie, or a big C calorie, is just a unit of energy equivalent to 4.1868 kilojoules. And kilojoules are just another unit of energy. So that's going to stay constant. And if you remember, a joule is a watt per second. So if you do 1 watt for 1 second, that's 1 joule. That's a tiny amount of energy. So we typically speak in terms of kilojoules. It's more relevant. So the kilojoule to kilocal, or big C calorie with a big C, is used to estimate our caloric spend. And this is where I think the confusion creeps into it, because we're effectively determining the amount of food energy. And that's maybe the term that will help this make more sense that we're using. And in order to calculate that, we multiply it. I think at TrainerRoad, we use the 22% or whatever it may be as an estimate, because our mechanical efficiency as humans is poor. About the far majority of our food energy is dissipated as heat. Talked about that a lot. So
can I just
really,
say that, Chad, I'm gonna do you mind if I jump in on that?
Sure.
So what Chad just said is, when you are pedaling, for the calories that you're burning, only 22% of that is going to the actual pedals. The rest is everything else that's going on. It gets dissipated as heat. Which is, so if you were like 80, 90% efficient, you would be the fastest, you would win every world record in the world. And not even be that trained, right? Because if I was at 330, I'd be like, I'd triple my FTP. Yeah. It'd be insane, right?
If you could be at 30%, if you could be at 30%, you'd be that. I mean,
not even that, even 23%, right, Chad? Because
sort of, not me,
sort of,
because to a certain extent, though, I just want to cover this point. Because like you said, efficiency is still up for grabs for many athletes, right? And when we look at this, if you look at the tour, and I know none of us are racing. Oh, not none of us. Tade is definitely listening right now. But for most of us here, we're not racing. That's right. Yeah. mid sprint. But we're probably not racing the tour. But if you look at a lot of your races, it's a lot of the time it's won. I mean, if it's a sprint finish, it's won by a fraction of a percent. You can't even measure it really. But it's the Tour de France is going to be won probably by less than 1% of the total time. And if you look in a lot of races, that 1% is a big difference. Now, I know we're talking about different variables here, different things, different outcomes, but a small increase in efficiency can have a profound effect on performance. Huge, so it's really like, I know that we're always tempted to just say, well, I just need 50 more watts and a big jump, but that small percentage difference can really make a difference on race day. So
the other interesting thing at the really high level athletes, they don't all have the same VO2 max or efficiency or ability to operate a threshold. It's like they'll be world-class in different things. So one person will have a lower VO2 max, but exceptional efficiency. And that's why they're able to operate at that really high level. And someday there will be a person who's born who has all of those things. And that will be really interesting.
His name is Matthew Van Der Poel.
Person's been born. Yeah, they're out there. There's a few of them.
Yeah. Sorry,
okay,
Chad,
so
on.
As we're talking about, no apologies. About, if we're lucky, we're getting about a quarter of our output is actually making it to the pedals, is actually resonating or accomplishing mechanical work. This 22% was landed on because some paper way back targeted or gave a range of 18 to 26%. What's smack dab in the middle of that? Therefore, the average is 22%. So that's where it stuck. What further science or further research has demonstrated is probably closer to 22%. So maybe that puts the number down to 21%. But either way, we're talking about not even a quarter of the work we do makes it to the pedals. So the point here is you have to determine your food energy utilization. Okay, that's really what we're talking about. And in order to do that, we have to consider what we're going to talk about today is economy. So if we look at the pillars of endurance performance that we've mentioned a number of times, it's this 3 pillars, right? VO2 max, your fractional utilization, and economy. So let's talk about economy. If we look at it, and the automotive analogy is used quite often, and rightly so, it makes sense. It's miles per gallon or kilometers per liter, right? When it comes to athletes, we measure oxygen, and we typically look at it in milliliters or liters per watt or per mile per hour, kilometer per hour, if we're measuring velocity as we would in runners. But we're going to talk about cycling economy. So cycling economy basically boils down to how much oxygen is consumed when you're producing so many watts. So, and this ties directly to your question, William, economy is almost always applied to sub-threshold work. And honestly, I didn't really come across why it only looks at sub-threshold. I mean, I can make some certain deductions, some assumptions, and I'm going to make one right now. It's most important at sustainable outputs. I mean, we only ride at high percentages of threshold for little periods of time. Are we really concerned with the efficiency over those little blips here and there? No, we want to know what happens when we're settled in and we're going to be there for a while. So that makes what I feel it makes economy most important is the sustainable workloads. So interestingly, the oxygen requirements can actually be calculated-ish, and I'll explain why ish. I was reading, or I think it was a podcast or website, whatever, it doesn't matter. I was watching someone speak the other day, and he's a reputable resource. I've paid attention to the man for a long time, and he knows his stuff. And he said that it takes basically 12 milliliters of oxygen per minute to make a watt. So if you multiply that out, you're looking at 1.2 liters per minute for 100 watts, 2.4 for 200, 3.6 for 300, 4.8 for 400. And this is probably a very good small ballpark number, right? It's going to get us close. And in most cases, it's going to be all we ever need. But athletes can produce power without oxygen too, right? I mean, anaerobic glycolysis. So we can make energy, make work without utilizing oxygen. Excuse me. So riding at 400 watts isn't always going to mean that you're uptaking, consuming 4.8 liters of oxygen, but it can. You just have to account for RER, which is that respiratory exchange ratio that we have to measure, with a mask that measures both the oxygen in and the carbon dioxide out. And an example of where that number might fall on the 0 to 1 scale is 0.9. 0.9 telling us that we've veered away from the 0.7 where we're predominantly metabolizing fat, more toward the 0.1 where we're predominantly metabolizing carbohydrate. So it's a scale. And different RERs, different 0 to 1 figures mean different percentages of fuel are being utilized at the moment. So why is that useful to us? And I think a seminal study that's been referred to many times way back in 1988 from Andrew Coggin and Ed Coyle looked at 14 well-trained male cyclists, and all these guys had VO2 max on the absolute side between 4.6 and 5 liters per minute. So that put them right in the mid 60s to low 70s. So well-trained, not stellar, but certainly well-trained. 7 of these athletes, so half of them reached their lactate thresholds, and let's just call it FTP because it's close enough for what we're talking about right here, at about 66% of their VO2 max. The other 7 of them didn't hit VO2 or didn't hit their FTP or lactate threshold until about 82% of their VO2 max. That's a 16% difference. That's massive in riders who are very similar. So that 66% group was already making a big anaerobic contribution at only 2/3 of their VO2 max. So less efficient use of that incoming oxygen. So consider the endurance impact here. And they did. They had them ride, all of them, at 88% of their VO2 max. And what happened? The 66% group lasted for about 30 minutes. The 82% group, 60 minutes. That's twice as long. That was the difference in this particular set of riders' endurance. So the anaerobic contribution was minimized in that 82% because they had made better utilization of the oxygen. They had greater aerobic capacity, less anaerobic metabolism, less lactate production, less blood and muscle acidity, or a lower acidity. So if I understand, this greater endurance is due simply to higher economy because their FTP occurred at drastically different percentages of their VO2 max. So the point is you could have similar VO2 maxes, but very different abilities to use oxygen. So on the one hand, we got riders who are burning through their anaerobic stores versus the other riders who are minimally touching them. So as I see it, and give me a bit of leeway here, that economy could almost be defined as a greater preservation of your anaerobic stores. It's one way to view it.
Yeah.
The bigger point, though, is that both of the groups were consuming the same volume of oxygen, but the aerobically fitter athletes were doing far more work with theirs. Economy. So they were more efficient. They exhibited greater economy. So while we're on the topic, and since I've already done it several times, economy versus efficiency. These terms are used almost interchangeably, and in the context of most conversations, that's not a problem. Just leave it be. It doesn't need to be dissected. But if you want to look into it a little deeper and try to delineate, well, come along with me, and I'll give you my best guess at it, because I haven't got it figured out yet, but I think I'm getting a little closer. Economy seems to be the broader definition. Okay, so it's quite simply the velocity for runners, the power for riders produced for the energy expended. Okay, so power to energy. Power out to energy in, whatever. Well, efficiency, man, it appears to have many types, and I'm not entirely sure that's true, because I saw the terms metabolic efficiency, gross efficiency, aerobic efficiency, muscular efficiency. There were others, and they all seem to be the same thing. It's mechanical work performed relative to energy expended. Same damn thing. So I don't know why I don't quite get it. And to add more confusion to this whole confusing situation already is that different researchers will define it differently in their studies. So I don't even know that it's agreed upon. I don't know how you do a review over this sort of thing. So for us, economy is going to be our umbrella term, and it's going to cover all manner of efficiency. So that metabolic efficiency, which covers things like core temperature, your fiber type, which is going to have a genetic component and is also the topic for my next deep dive. Substrate utilization. So, how much fat are you using, how much carbohydrate you're using. It's going to cover respiratory efficiency. So your VO2 max, your heart rate, your ventilation. Biomechanical efficiency, anthropometric measures, right? Limb lengths, body lengths, things like that. Again, big genetic component. Pedaling style, flexibility. Neuromuscular efficiency, the neural signaling, how well does your brain communicate with the muscle fibers, motor patterns, force production. All of these have potential influences on your economy, or cycling economy, as we're talking about.
If you would up each one of those by a fraction of a percent, it would have a profound impact on the athlete that you become.
It'd be measurable. I fully believe that. Okay, so let's talk about measuring economy. And specifically, we'll look at the units of measurement. So when it comes to running economy, that's typically expressed in milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute. So just like VO2 max, right? Relative to some speed. So at 10 miles per hour or 16 kilometers per hour, how much oxygen are you consuming? Cycling economy seems to be, and this carried across the studies that I looked at, is watts per liter of oxygen per minute. So an example of this is 7 pro cyclists were looked at. They rode at 385 watts, and they ranged from 4.8 to 5.1 liters per minute at that 385 watts, which already demonstrates that even at the same watts, differing oxygen consumption, so different levels of efficiency. So cycling economy really is just how much oxygen does it take you to produce 150 watts, 200 watts, 400 watts, and any reduction in the power output relative to the oxygen you're consuming yields a higher efficiency. So if we take this back around to those endurance performance pillars that I talked about earlier, as I see it, your capacity is your VO2 max, right? That's the roof of the house, and that sets the limit. But within that limit, your cycling efficiency can change how that capacity is utilized. And in doing so, it'll actually affect your fractional utilization. So all those three pillars are all coalescing, are always affecting one another to some extent. So the question here is, how greatly can this particular pillar impact performance? And the example I'm going to cite, yes, it's a running example, but it illustrates this perfectly, and we've already kind of touched on it. As you look at Paula Radcliffe back in the early 90s and early 2000s, so about an 11-year span, study by Andy Jones a few years later in 2006, looked at the relationship between VO2 max and race times, finding that her VO2 max held constant across this 11-year span, hovered right around 70. But she got faster and faster and faster, and eventually set a world record in the marathon, which I'm pretty sure she's still second in that standing, and only by a fraction of, or a portion of a minute. So while there was no correlation between her VO2 max and her faster and faster times, there was a distinct correlation between her times and her economy, a strong one. What Andy Jones found, is that she increased her running economy, which led to the faster times and eventually the world record by 15% over this 11-year span. Whoa. Which is massive. She's already a high-level athlete, already, turning in ridiculously fast times. So even at the highest end of things, there's still room for improvements in efficiency. Sobering fact is that it's going to take a high VO2 max and a high level of economy to set world records. But, more encouragingly and more relevant to most of us is that all three of these pillars are very trainable. Mm-hmm. And more encouragingly is that a weakness in one, just like Nate said, can be compensated for with strengths in the other. You have a low VO2 max, big deal. Increase your fractional utilization, push that FTP up to a higher percentage of it, increase your economy. Okay. So how do we increase economy?
What's interesting though, too, about the Paula Radcliffe world record is when it was broken, it was like, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? It was in Chicago.
It's recent.
I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it happened, they had she had vapor flies too. Not to take anything away from that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if Paula Radcliffe had
certain
vapor
advantages
flies during the same time, yeah, because that's like a 1% to 2%, I think, increase, and that is the Nike shoe with the carbon plate in it that has a much very controversial, but that is in Kipchoge. I can never say Kipchoge. He had a very on his record. He had a one with 3 plates in it, like a crazy one. But that does that really small increase. So just super props to Paula Radcliffe for
that's a fair point. It's not a level playing field, and her deficit was not even a minute. So
it'd be interesting to see. But who knows, right? Same thing with all world records. You're like, oh, now you have faster tires now or better aerodynamics, and nowadays.
Yeah,
that's the nature of it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so back to how do we train economy? So an easy way to imagine how you might train your economy is to look at the factors affecting economy. So what's your training history? You've been at this for a couple of years, you've been at this for a couple of decades. What type of exercise are you doing? Long, slow miles, you hitting intervals, combination of the two, whatever. What training phase are you in? Basically ties to what I just said. The quantity of training or your training volume, the level of fatigue in your body that particular day, the surface of the terrain that you're riding on. And as much as I don't want to talk about it, your diet. So, and I'm going to put this in here because I know that some poor soul is going to have to deal with this on the forum. So it won't be me. So let me try to help you out. So if you're a carbohydrate centric eater versus a fat centric eater, you're going to yield different RERs. There's different substrate utilization going on, right? You have different enzymes that are going to help you metabolize one of those fuels over the other because that's what you're feeding your body all the time. So the same power output will have different fuel percentages, different efficiency, but this is not automatically a win. Being more economical at subthreshold paces, meaning that you have more power output per milliliter of oxygen consumed, comes with certain expenses. We've talked about this. You lose your high end. Your repeatability, especially high end repeatability, can suffer. Your ability to metabolize carbohydrate suffers. So greater economy doesn't always translate to higher levels of performance. You can improve your economy, but not necessarily get faster, not perform better. In some cases, that's just the opposite. It can happen, but the assumption is that if I can metabolize oxygen better because I have a higher fat diet, I'm going to be faster. That doesn't carry. Okay, so how do we affect it? first and foremost, and this is, man, it's widely agreed upon, strength training, because it does so many good things for you. First off, it increases your force capacity. So how many muscle
this
fibers
is why you watch
can you
on
recruit?
YouTube. Nate just gave us a strongman flex. So
I didn't really give it the real gun show, but just a little bit.
No, that's real.
Don't make me break these out, Nate says. Yeah.
Even that upper body stuff has utility, and I'll explain that. But so greater force capacity. You can push on the pedals harder. You can recruit more muscle fibers. You improved your motor patterns, which is basically coordination, and that's a huge deal. And it actually seems to have a greater impact than increasing maximal force. So your 1 second power versus how coordinately you turn the pedals is probably more.
What was that word?
Science says. I don't know. I'm pretty sure.
We all understand it, Nate. But you bring up such a good point, right, Chad? Like when you try to do sprints for the first time in the year, you're just like, you feel like you're going to fall off your bike. It's so awkward. And then you do more and more of it, and suddenly it just becomes second nature, and you get way more for what a given amount of effort.
Some people. Not all people.
We've all seen the video.
Now that you're like upper body jacked, what if you sprint incredibly well?
I don't think I will, because I should try it, but my front chainring too is popping off the front when I go hard, so I don't want to sprint at the moment. I need to get that fixed. But
just fix that.
Yeah. It is I forgot. Oh, no, I've never been able to really unlock my full like strength when I sprint. I'm like loosey goosey, and you've seen the sprint video, so I hope that that happens. We'll see. Yeah, look at an 1800 watt sprint.
I think that's more of a coordination matter right there. So that's exactly what we're talking about. You've got a ton of force, but you just can't apply it in a coordinated enough manner, to make it useful, to make it propel you. Instead, you just kind of flounder side to side.
It's horrible. It's like
every post ride conversation I was going to be like, guys, I have so much force. It's just I'm able to use it all.
So much. Yeah. He's like a drag car on bicycle tires. He's just spinning around. So sorry, Chad, we derailed you with flexing and all sorts of terrible things.
That's okay. We're still on strength training. So one of the other benefits of strength training is stability. So think of that just in terms of less wasted movement. So better transfer of power to the pedals. Strength training can also help you iron out imbalances. So if you think of these wasteful compensatory patterns that we pick up because, our hips are a little canted and we don't recognize it, and one leg's a little stronger than the other, whatever it may be. If you do single leg exercises, it'll help you flesh this out. They're also referred to as unilateral exercises. They're especially good for this. Flexibility work obviously can help too. If one leg's tighter than the other, they're going to ride differently. That's probably going to cost you some efficiency.
Chad, if I could just throw in an Amber point, I bet this went through your head, Amber, because you mentioned it before, but those sort of single leg exercises and the sort of stuff where you're not trying to leg press, 600 pounds with one leg, but it's simple stuff like Bulgarian split squats, even without weights. They build a level of proprioception as well that really goes a long way with that coordination side of things, right? And
big time. That's
such a huge, because what you're doing on the bike is constant unilateral exercise. You're constantly doing that. And that proprioception of the fine tuning of balance and nerve control when you're doing that, it's just so cool. It helps a ton. So I notice a direct correlation when I stop strength training to me wondering what's wrong on the bike when I'm descending, mountain biking, or doing anything, or not feeling like I can sprint well. It's not because I'm getting big muscles. It's because I'm fine tuning those coordination points. So
right. It's huge. And now Chad's enlightening as to exactly what the mechanism is by which this actually makes you feel so much better.
Yep. Okay. So strength training first and foremost, and seriously heads the list every time. Because the other alternatives, the first one's ride lots, and that just depends on how much time you have to dedicate to it. So you gotta grease that groove, right? This is especially visible in runners, where there are tons of studies that tie economy to the number of years runners have run, the number of miles they've accumulated, and there are quite a few cycling studies that do the same thing. Look at the cyclists, pro level cyclists who have competed for 3 years versus those who have competed for 5 years, and there's a distinct measurable difference. So, okay. And the next in line, technique. So if we look at technique through the oxygen cost lens, perhaps it'll resonate a bit more with some people. The idea of mashing and bouncing versus spinning fluidly. I mean, just imagine, just picture it in your head. Which one do you think is more efficient? The one who's, glued to the saddle, Grant Thomas style, just motoring along, looking like he's not doing any work at all. Or I can't even think of his name.
Don't say it. Don't say it.
The Crab, way back when. It's an older rider, but he rode horribly and he was fast. But imagine if he was just a bit more coordinated, a bit less oxygen costly. And then just what about the tension that you carry? My workout text is always telling you drop your shoulders, loosen your grip, soften your elbows, etc., because that's costing you oxygen. So some of the oxygen that's coming through your body is going to those tense, underutilized, unutilized muscles. So let it go.
John and I saw this live when Chad did his RER test where he had the mask on and he could see the RER live of fat versus carbs. And he would look at it and then you'd see him drop his shoulders and relax and it would shift down to more fat in the middle of his test. And then he would they'd up the watts and then he relaxed a little more and he would actually put it back down to where it was at a lower watt level. Live on while he was riding.
Yeah.
Chad, you may not remember this, but this has stuck in my head. And this always
Nate and I were shocked. Yeah.
I know. The tester was shocked too. I don't think most people try to relax like that, and Chad is aware of it. I just think of a long race. Yeah. If I'm tense, you get so excited, right, in a race.
Yeah.
Rather than being loosey goosey. And
that's
talk about these small. Sorry, Chad. Talking about these small changes, but this is something that everyone can do. Is just relax and have a drop shoulders and take some deep breaths, and you could burn more fat and then thus have more anaerobic stores later. It's crazy.
No, that dovetails into exactly the point I was going to make.
Yeah, Super Saiyan level relaxation over there by Chad. So it's incredible. He's elevated. Oh, it's just a Dragon Ball Z reference, but he's he's elevated to the next level, basically. Chad's able to just control all things and within him. It's pretty cool. So,
but to your point, Nate, this is one way to all of these things contribute to managing fatigue, which is often enough, in fact, pretty much all the time, a key concern. So doing all these things, riding more in a more coordinated manner, not coordinatedly, help us postpone that wasteful, those deteriorating mechanics that only grow worse, right? So the idea is that greater economy means lower utilization of those anaerobic resources, those finite energy sources, less muscle stress, slower rate of fatigue, which leads to a less rapid slip in mechanics over the course of really any duration. I mean, just think of a 3-minute VO2 max push where you start out super fluid during the first minute, second minute, you're just kind of hanging in there. And then the third minute, wheels start to come off the wagon, right? But if you could just rein that back in and ride as smoothly as you did in the first minute, I promise you, your oxygen costs would come down. So to restate this, strength train, increase your mileage if you have that option, even if it's just once every 6, 8, 10 days, whatever it may be, and work on your technique, and all of those things. And then finally, William, let me just tidy this up by saying that I can see many ways we'd be less efficient at higher intensities, but because they're so short-lived, I'm not sure it's of great concern. Doesn't appear to be so in the research, not with coaches, and probably not with athletes.
Mm. Super interesting deep dive on that, Chad. And it's probably something that I feel like if I could add to your restated suggestions, patience as well is one, is that this does take time to build. And with time, you'll just get better and better. And that's also, that's why Amber got to experience that firsthand, being a professional cyclist and dedicating so much time to it for so many years. And, you build that sort of ability to be able to be successful in the group later on. And it's a combination of all things. Amber's so great at breaking down a race and understanding what needs to happen. And that also aids the efficiency, helps you relax. So
experience really helps. And like Chad said, adding, riding more, but if you can't ride more and you're kind of worried about do I really have to race for 10 years to get all this? No, paying attention and being really mindful of everything that you are actually doing will go a really, really long way. So like Chad said, there's multiple ways of building your economy. It's not just one. So if one of those avenues isn't as available to you as the others, focus on those others really well and be really, really mindful about how you're executing them.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.